Hello, everybody. Welcome back for the next episode of Cracking the Code. This is episode number 21. We are going to be covering the FTC finalization of their changes to the health breach notification rule. This is a little bit of a continuation or a loop back from Cracking the Code episode 13 back in the spring of 2023. So if you haven't watched that one, please do. It sets a good groundwork here. It sets the stage for what we're talking about today with the actual finalization of this rule. So as always, here is Chris Bowen, our Chief Information and Security Officer of ClearData. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Natalie. Thanks
Good.
for asking.
I'm here to pick your brain about some of this stuff. We're going to circle back. I'll ask you to give a little bit of some groundwork here, but thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let's dive in. All right. First, can you remind the viewers and just provide a high-level overview of what the health breach notification rule is and maybe how it differs from the protections afforded by HIPAA?
Yeah, two completely different laws or rules, if you will. Administrative law fits in that category. HIPAA was written in 1996. Bill Frist, Senator Bill Frist, if I recall, was one of the chief authors of HIPAA. And the HIPAA security rule, HIPAA privacy rule, HIPAA breach notification rule is all about making sure that certain data is protected. The data has to be part of healthcare treatment, payment, or operations. That's what defines PHI, protected health information. And many times people think that HIPAA was all about making sure your data is private. Well, it was actually all about making sure that your data is portable. And in terms of making your data available for treatment, care, and operations, you have to have certain protections in place on that data. Now, fast forward a few years, a lot of years actually, and the FTC has started to, several years ago, started to take notice of the fact that there was a mass amount of confusion around, I've got health-related data, but that may not actually necessarily be PHI, because health-related data maybe comes from your watch. You know, it's measuring my activity tracking, it's measuring my steps, whatever it is, my heartbeat. And many times people would mistakenly believe that their data, that kind of data, is protected under HIPAA or some kind of data protection. Well, guess what, folks? It's not. It hasn't been. And so health-related applications, spawning lots of data, and they could do whatever they want with it. They could share it, they could sell it. If you think about the patchwork of privacy laws all over the country, if you messed up if you had that data get exposed, then guess what would happen? Not a damn thing.
Right.
Right? Not a thing. And there were many attempts along the way for different parties to try to say, hey, let's figure out how to make it so that when someone's health-related data is breached, that they can actually be notified of that and that they have some kind of recourse. Well, the FTC came along and said, hey, that's a really good point. Let's start to crack down on egregious violations of people's information if it's shared inappropriately. And so they started working on the health breach notification rule. And what that really says is if you have health-related data and it's not already covered or addressed by the HIPAA security, privacy, or breach notification rules, mostly it's the privacy rule, then, and if there is a breach, then you need to notify those that are victims of that breach of that health-related data. And there have been lots of examples of misuse.
Right.
I'll give you one. We're on a Zoom call right now. Remember what happened during COVID? Well, Zoom was part of the telemedicine approach. And what did they do with 80 million records of people who were having Zoom conversations with their doctor? They sold it to Facebook. Big lawsuit several years ago. So we also have other examples. GoodRx. GoodRx did similar
Yes, you did
things.
talk about that one. Yes.
We talked about GoodRx, and instead of saying, hey, you know what, we're sorry that we sent all this data somewhere where the consumers didn't have any clue about, they basically said tough cookies. They really didn't care. They really didn't care. And so there's another Pre-Mom was another application that shared some data. And so kudos to the FTC for coming up with this approach and basically saying we're not going to take this anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. And you make a good point there. I was having a conversation recently where individuals do not know that this is happening to them. And Clear Data commissioned a poll last year and found that over 80% of consumers who have these these watches and the platforms and engage with these companies where they're sharing their health information don't realize that it's not protected under HIPAA, or don't realize that the purpose of HIPAA was more portability with the privacy and instead of the actual protection of it. So I think there's just a big misunderstanding of what HIPAA is and what it means to protect our data and what that data is. So so can you give a little bit of some of these revising definitions? Can you go over any of the changes from the FTC and exactly how they might be cracking down? And although this is a step in the right direction, do they need to go further?
Well, the rule is fairly new, so
Mhm.
it will continue to evolve. It's interesting to note that they're cracking down on these companies in an aggressive way.
Mhm.
Now, they're probably going to get more aggressive as they see more egregious violations of the rule.
Mhm.
And of course, we know that, as you said, many Americans have no idea that their data is being sold, is being, sold to the highest bidder, if you will. And the fact is, it's important that we maintain control of our own data. It's almost impossible these days, but it's important that we consent to what the data is used for. So I don't know that I answered your question, but let's come back to the individual and say, try to be responsible for your data. I know it's difficult because your data is everywhere at this point.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions as well. As consumers, when we've discussed this before, and you've participated in webinars where you've discussed this as well. But what's our responsibility as consumers to protect ourselves, our privacy, our data, and maybe is it an educational issue? I mean, I don't think I'm going to stop using my Nike apps or my Peloton. I don't really see that happening. So, me as a consumer, is it just more of an education thing, or do I just hit the consent to those terms and conditions and then it's gone from there?
Well, it's even more personal than that. If you think about this Zoom call that we're having, that we're recording, if you don't consent to their terms, you don't get to use the platform.
We're doing it all the time.
We're doing it all the time. And so what's the recourse? To your point, we don't have a lot of recourse.
Mhm.
We can say, hey, we're going to stop using my iPhone. Yeah, I'm not going to stop using my iPhone. Neither are you.
Mhm.
And do you really read the notice that says, hey, I'm going to read these 14 pages of legal terms, and then I'm going to say, I don't think I like that, so I'm not going to use the phone I just spent $1,000 for.
Mhm.
You know,
Absolutely.
so there's not a lot that we can do at this point. I think it comes back to uh, data minimization.
Mhm.
If you can stop sharing your data in ways that is appropriate, if you can turn on your private Instagram setting instead of public, if you can just do certain things to help protect yourself, even set up Google Voice if you don't want to give your phone to everybody. Now my phone number's been out there on the dark web for ages. Thank you to the 8 breaches that I've been part of.
That's
But
great.
but the other big challenge, Natalie, is the breaches related to pixels. Now, let's talk about those for a second. We these are some that have really been snaring certain health systems when they use things like a uh, Google Pixels and things like that to track what's happening with the data that they get. And sometimes millions and millions of people get caught up in all that, and their
Mhm.
data's now been shared without consent. And now in HIPAA worlds, that's a big deal.
Mhm.
In normal worlds where you're not subject to HIPAA, Well, now the FTC comes into play, and they'll be doing the enforcement.
Very good. Very good. I do want to, you recently participated in a webinar about minimizing third-party risk in healthcare, especially given the major breaches in healthcare that have always been happening, but the major breach that everybody's discussing. And so I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit to minimizing third-party risk. If you are a digital health company, whether it be a company that does, report, does follow HIPAA or a health breach notification rule. But what can these digital health companies who are collecting our data, what can they do? If they don't have the infrastructure to manage the security and the privacy internally, what can they do when they're looking at a third-party vendor?
Well, so if I'm a vendor, let's say I'm Clear Data, which that's us, and we're trying to hire someone to do or buy some platform to help us enable our communications, for example, we will do a lot of vetting. We will frustrate our marketing department by slowing things down just a bit and say, let's take a look at what's under the covers here and see how they're handling their data throughout the life cycle. Data life cycle, very simple. Data is created, it's distributed, it's used, it's maintained, it's archived, eventually it's destroyed, you hope. And so how does the company address the data? What are their policies and procedures along that data life cycle? And how do they adhere to those policies and procedures? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing in that scenario? You can tell a lot about a company's privacy practices if you just ask them what the data life cycle is, and they say, what? And then you have to dig a little deeper and understand. And in many cases, you'll find this hilarious. We'll have companies that will want to do business with us that have never had or even imagined what a privacy policy is.
Wow.
Shocking. So what we end up doing is we have to sit down with them and help educate them about privacy and what it's about and why it's important. And we'll even help them create their own privacy policy in a way that works. And then we'll check on them on a periodic basis.
And that's being held to the highest standards, rigid standards of security and privacy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in HIPAA world, it's mandated. We have to flow down the contract terms or they don't get to play ball. We just turned down a huge company a couple of weeks ago because they refused to share with us any of their audit reports that says that we're doing what we're saying we're doing. We had to say, no, I'm sorry, but if you can't show us that, then we can't do business with you.
Wow.
But that's what needs to happen.
Absolutely. And because at the end of the day, we're handling patient data, and this is about patient safety. And you have, led Clear Data and founded Clear Data with the patient first mindset and everything like that. So, do companies then, these digital health companies, do they have a responsibility to increase transparency and communication with the consumers? I know we're not technically patients, but our health records, as you've stated many times, they don't expire. That is why there is such a high demand for this data. So, what can the companies do to maybe increase transparency with their consumers in terms, maybe it's education, and then just kind of ending on what we as consumers just in general can do to protect our data, whether it be passwords and X, Y, and Z, these small hacks. Like you said, you've been breached 8 times, and you are following all of the proper guidelines, of course, but just a little bit of education to leave our consumers.
Sometimes you can't do anything about it. I was wrapped up in 2 breaches from our federal government, the U.S. House of Representatives and the FBI. So my data was sitting there. It was supposed to be protected, and guess what? It wasn't. So sometimes you're just a victim, and you're doing all the right things, to your point. In terms of transparency, share with the world what you're doing from a privacy perspective. Apple does a great job of that. I really do admire, Apple's approach, which is let's be transparent. Let's tell you that your iPhone was logged into by someone somewhere else, and let's make sure that someone knows that. Let's make sure that your SMS, not your SMS, but your iMessage is encrypted end to end, which is the case. It's not the case with everything, for sure, but if you say you're going to do something, do it as a company.
Absolutely.
on
There's
a,
a responsibility there for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we are not going to have enough time to talk about it today, but I would like to ping you for a discussion about a national privacy law. There have been some updates in legislation there, so I think that that will be our next episode. But I do want to leave viewers. ClearData offers a cloud risk checkup. If you are a company working in the cloud and you'd like your infrastructure evaluated, please do. I think we'll do another QR code in the screen somewhere, so please scan that. It's painless, we promise. We'll scan the infrastructure, give you a full report of your cloud security posture, and we look forward to the next episode. Chris, thank you as always for your thoughts today. Anything else departing before we log off?
I'll echo what you said on the cloud risk checkup. One of the things that we're seeing, and this comes straight from the Change Health breach, IAM, identity and access management. If you think that you're doing great in your cloud environment and you haven't done some hygiene on your IAM, go take a look. Make sure you have MFA in place. Make sure that you have rotated your keys, or eliminated those user accounts, those other accounts that need to be pruned, if you will. That's what brought down Change.
Mhm.
So that's the cloud risk checkup will help cover some of that.
Thank you. Yes. And to that point, that reminded me, I'm going to link in the resources here a couple of recent events from ClearData, Chris, that webinar about third-party risk. We'll link to episode number 13 as well as that cloud risk checkup. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on episode 22. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Natalie. Bye.